Castlevania II: Simon's Quest is criminally misunderstood. The game is known for its mistranslated dialogue and head-scratching in-game events. Clues to solve Dracula's riddle have little rhyme or reason attached to them. Yet, what if I told you this was done by design? As I mentioned prior, Simon's Quest was my very first hands-on experience with Castlevania. To be quite honest, the music and atmosphere alone scared the hell out of me. I'm trying to think what I would compare that to. It's sorta like this feeling of playing through Echo the Dolphin. Has anyone attempted to do so? You know how the further you explore the depths of the seafloor, the weirder shit starts to get? There's this ambiance about it that just sorta off-putting. Castlevania II has that same unsettling feeling about it, almost as if you're watching a creepypasta unfold before your eyes. Nevertheless, there's no denying the stigma Simon's Quest is now permanently cursed with. And let's be honest, after a certain someone jump-started their career off the backs of these familiar gripes, along with many games of this era, I think it's only fair to reopen that mental flesh wound for a good cleansing. Funny enough though, I think in large part, there's a bit of self-awareness embedded in the narrative. In fact, around the time of release, many praised this very sequel with critical acclaim. There was also something unique about getting lost in a moment with No Way Home, and many would do just that as Simon's Quest continued to maintain atop the charts for years that followed. And I can't help but to think this was for a damn good reason. Our story opens 7 years after Dracula's defeat at the hands of Simon Belmont. While visiting his family's resting place, a mysterious woman appears before him, informing our grizzled young Belmont that a curse was inflicted upon him during his battle with Dracula. The woman further explains that Simon has finite time to lift a curse before it ultimately consumes him. This can only be done so by resurrecting the Prince of Darkness in order to properly seal his power. After Dracula's defeat, his remains were salvaged and scattered throughout the lands now preserved as powerful relics, wielded by his loyal following. These remains are locked away inside the many mansions spread across Transylvania. Simon must reunite these flesh relics. Is that a thing? Can we call them that at this point? Anyhow, Simon must reunite these relics inside the now withered remains of Castle Dracula to resurrect our vampire king. For our storied sequel, Hitachi Akamatsu would lead the project once more, taking our prideful Belmont in a bit of a different direction. He would look to further build upon his horror-esque action platformer by including RPG elements, placing a greater emphasis on exploration and discovery. He would find that very inspiration from Konami's latest release, The Maze of Gallius, which incorporated in many puzzle-solving elements along with a map system. He probably wouldn't say it back then, but you know damn well he got some of those creative juices flowing after witnessing Metroid firsthand. Simon's Quest would be the series' second release for the Famicom Disk System, while released stateside would need some alterations in order to be converted to fit snugly inside that sleek new NES cartridge design we all know and love today. There were a few significant changes made due to variables between the Famicom Disk release and the NES release. The Disk System featured a save feature due to the Disk System's format allowing for larger storage capacity. On the flip side, the NES release utilized the password feature to return where we left off. Taking advantage of bank switching techniques and solid memory costs for comparable storage space would allow for improved music quality on the NES, rearranging many tracks to take advantage of the NES hardware. Speaking of soundtracks, Simon's Quest was composed by Kenichi Matsubara, who methodically brought us bloody tears. One thing I absolutely love about Simon's Quest is the way each theme throughout captures the adventure elements to a T, giving you this loud and proud feeling of exploration, yet in the same breath, this sense of desperation and uncertainty. Simon's Quest takes a radically different approach from the traditional formula we're familiar with. Our storied origins relied heavily on the quick reflexes and high-speed strats, racking up bonuses to carry you through the many stage blocks of Dracula's twisted estate. Simon's Quest hits differently, incorporating in a great deal of RPG elements built around a leveling system, guiding you across the lands of Transylvania. Where the original Castlevania utilized hearts as a mere means of ammunition for sub-weapons, in Castlevania II, they're additionally a form of currency to purchase items and upgrades, while surprisingly, a unit of measure for experience, increasing Simon's health bar the more you collect them. After the battle with Dracula, Simon must have retired the legendary vampire killer back to the Belmont family stronghold. In Simon's Quest, you purchase whips from crooked traders. Oh, and do yourself a favor and buy the first one in the opening act. It's in the same town you begin in. The leather whip will save you a ton of time backtracking. After you come to the realization, you're gonna be chipping away at enemies, and by nightfall, enemies only grow stronger as zombies invade the nearby towns, running amok, forcing the townspeople to hide inside their homes till sunrise. You will have the opportunity to upgrade the whip up again soon enough, but will shave you off a great deal of time during the initial grind, preventing the risk of becoming swarmed by hordes of angry eyeballs. The Thorn Whip will be a noticeable upgrade, extending the overall length and range of your attack, while the Chain Whip's metal look just feels badass overall. The Holy Grail, however, is the infamous Morningstar, which ironically is sold in town by a sketchy overpriced retail shop. We all know a bit about those. You know, the ones just trying to keep the lights on, right? You can ultimately get a sweet power up for the Morningstar by endgame, torching anything with a flick of the wrist. Speaking of whips, your sub-weapons also return with a few upgrades that will aid you in your survival. The dagger makes a return to form, still giving you that clean trajectory, piercing the flesh of the many night creatures roaming about. Here, however, it needs to be searched out for purchase, discovering a few ways to upgrade it in due time. The silver knife will do just that, passing through on-screen enemies with a great deal of distance. The gold knife is that of Death's arsenal himself, a gift delivered in combat that passes through enemies while additionally erupting into a pretty sick ball of fire. Holy Water is god tier in this game, so buy it from the very start. It's pivotal to have equipped to uncover the many illusions lurking throughout the mansions ahead. They're littered with invisible bricks that will require you to spam each and every step you take. Bring some sage to this cursed keep too, because you will be pulling your hair out the moment you step foot in this sorry excuse for an escape room. Some bricks will need to be sprinkled with holy water to reveal clues buried inside the walls, giving you the very clues to solve the unsolvable mysteries. Holy water in combat is just as sweet as before, lighting up enemies in a blaze. You can also search out the sacred flame that when thrown has a similar effect, yet when it lands, a pillar of flames rise up for some additional damage, stunning the night creatures. Interestingly enough is the diamond that ricochets off surfaces and walls with varying degree, which to be honest probably works best in confined spaces. The key to Simon's Quest is moving with efficiency while utilizing your time and tools wisely, even more so in story as Simon is withering away with every moment that passes. Simon's Quest revolves around a day and night cycle that varies depending on the time of day. During the day, townspeople are out and about, engaging in small talk, offering hints that may or may not be helpful to you, while merchants conveniently sell items like garlic or laurels that are needed to seek out the key items to progress the story. Let's talk about these items just a bit. They have many uses to them and are crucial to solve the many puzzles of Simon's Quest. The crystals are by far the most integral. Think of them as your keys to accessing the many mansions housing Dracula's remains. Each crystal holds a unique ability that must be activated in order to progress. They're held by people of power and will need to be bought or traded like those high-end Pokemon cards you see on YouTube. The first one literally turns up at the very start of the game, yet traveling the roads and finding the influencers holding the blue and red crystals gets a bit trickier. Garlic is every vampire's favorite delicacy and one I tend to use more often in my cuisine. Apparently, it's a rare commodity in these parts. Dropping them in specific locations lures some of the most sketchy looking culinary masters of the Transylvania culinary arts. In all seriousness, it's a thank you for bringing them protection from Dracula's troops, and they reward you with some key items. Another superfood of Simon's Quest are laurels that apparently taste fantastic in soup. Their side effects are superhuman, giving you temporary immunity to open a can on some night creatures or to travel the poison marshes. There's also a silk bag that can be awarded to you that can increase your carrying capabilities of these delightful foods, so be sure to seek this one out when you get the chance. Remember, you're searching out answers, traveling the countryside, engaging with townsfolk, and getting tipped off to where to journey to next. Every clue is needed to solve Dracula's riddle, and in time, you tear down the many mansions brick by brick to uncover these clues. Keep in mind, time doesn't pass while inside a building or mansion, so strategize accordingly as you will be spending a great deal of time in these. The mansions are often a puzzle in their own right, and to solve them, you need the 13 clue books left behind to guide Simon throughout. Interesting, that's what the old man mentioned. So, he wasn't lying after all? Here Dracula's remains are sealed away in a magic orb. Looking around a bit further, you will discover there's an oak stake for sale. Well, that's odd, but there's also a clue book here. A symbol of evil appears when you strike the stake. Well, that doesn't make much sense. Must be bad translation, right? Well, according to lore, you would typically drive a stake through the heart of a vampire, and striking an orb with a stake reveals the evil that is Dracula's remains. Okay, I get that, but seriously, how would anyone understand any of these clues? I mean, look right here at this one. Wait for a soul with a red crystal on the Boar Cliff. Come on now, how would anyone know to kneel there? Okay, sure, there's a sign that points to the direction of the Boar Cliff, but still, you gotta kneel? Why would you kneel down though? Wait for a soul? You want me to what, pretend as if I'm just waiting around? Like that old creepy bitch that told me to just live here for a while? Well, whatever. This game just doesn't explain anything, okay? Let's carry on. There's also key encounters inside these mansions that are left in the hands of the player. You can choose to cower away from these evils or face them for key items like the Holy Cross that Camilla possesses that breaks the seal around Castle Dracula. Recovering Dracula's parts grants you the many powers of the Count himself. Dracula's rib can protect you along the way, being used as a shield to deflect attacks. Well, that's pretty gross. If you really think about it, deflecting attacks with a whole ass ribcage? Dracula's heart is a symbol of courage. When shown to the right person, grants you access to our next destination. Listen, would you say no to a dude that hands you over the beating heart of Dracula? Yeah, I don't think so. Drax's eye reveals the location of the many clue books, while his nail grants you the power to break the cursed blocks, revealing paths inaccessible prior. The final remains of Dracula is more of what I would call a relic. Drax's ring is a nice stat boost while clearing the fog, revealing the path to Dracula's castle. Upon retrieving all of Dracula's remains, you arrive back to Castle Dracula. Memories slowly seep back into your subconscious, reminiscing of the giant stone structures that once towered over the lands, now crumble down before you. As you walk along the path of debris, you get some much needed closure with an old enemy. Simon brings the remains forth to burn to rid himself of the curse once and for all. Just then, buried deep within the chamber, an undiscovered sixth and final piece of remains lays dormant in the form of Dracula's fang, bringing forth the ghost of Dracula for a final encounter. Dracula's phantom form is almost this fusion of Dracula and the Grim Reaper, rotating about the room, delivering a roulette of attacks that only death himself could deal. He's pretty easy to put down with your flame whip and a hearty dose of holy water, but come to the fight unprepared and find out the hard way, as he can put you away with a single strike. After Simon seals Dracula away once and for all, he kneels and rests at the foot of Dracula's tombstone, waiting for fate to take a hold. Depending on the time it took to seal Dracula away will dictate Simon's fate. Be mindful that completing the game in over 14 days will find Simon fatally ill from the wounds, and as the battle wages on, he's dealt a fatal blow leading to his timely death. Finishing the game in a decent time, anywhere from 8 to 14 days, will result with Simon besting old Drac, but eventually falling ill to the curse slowly eating away at him. However, if you can manage to lift the curse in 7 days or less, Simon will make a full recovery, saying his farewell to Dracula as he restores peace and prosperity to the lands of Transylvania. However, later that evening, as the full moon stretches across the midnight sky, a hand pushes through the dirt of the gravestone, setting the stage for our next battle. To this day, I believe a big misconception with the localization of Simon's Quest was for you, the player, to take the many half-truths and riddles of old and put the pieces together. As you progress, you discover cryptic relics, misleading imagery, and hear far-fetched stories, all purposely done to drive home a narrative, establishing the game's underlying tones through storytelling, placing emphasis on one overall question: who or what can you trust? Although you take control of Simon Belmont, exploring the lands of Transylvania, discovering various clues to solve Dracula's riddle, you, the player, are meant to take the 13 clues and stories passed down and pull them out of context to decide for yourself what's fact and fiction. Why wouldn't corrupted townsfolk led by the word of Dracula lie to you? In a world where we are constantly debunking life's biggest mysteries, it's human nature that guides us to question the unknown. Only you can put the pieces back together in order to lay Dracula to rest once more. We now travel back to the year 1476, where we learn that Simon's ancestors were once exiled from the lands, only to be called upon once more in their darkest hour. When we return, we will be looking at Castlevania III: Dracula's Curse. Thanks for joining me.